Welcome to the Facebook Live Pun
Spectacular.
Pun Spectacular. Puntastic.
Yeah, it's a slightly different time this week, but very much the same format in that we're going to be looking ahead to Saturday's action, and it's pretty much about as good as it gets, really, in terms of action. And considering that the big guns are out, we thought we'd best get Timeform's big gun.
Wow. Yeah. Well, considering that this meeting is only a matter of years old, it's remarkable how quickly it has developed into this big end-of-season defining championship, which is meant to be 19 Group 1 winners across the 5 main races, then the handicap at the end. Not 5 Group 1s, as I mistakenly put at the top of my article, because the Long Distance Cup is only a Group 2, but it's only a matter of time, obviously, before that becomes a Group 1. So, yeah, the right sort of horses, the right sort of stories, but I suppose the one difference or the one complexity is obviously at the present it's sort of soft, heavy ground in places. That's not the ideal circumstances for an end-of-season championship. But by the same token, that's a good angle to think of and consider, and we'll be doing exactly that as we walk through the main races. In fact, all races on Champions Day.
Indeed. Do you remember the very first Champions Day?
Frankel?
Yeah. Don't mean to make you feel old when I say this, but I remember it being absurdly hot. I think I was in freshers of university and wearing shorts watching Frankel win the QE2, and it was bizarre. I think it was good to soft ground that day. It was that hot.
Yeah, and it depended where you were geographically as well, because I travelled down from the north, where we are now, to the south, where Ascot is. But the night before, we were stopping in a hotel, and there was even some doubts about A, whether the race would go ahead, and B, whether Frankel would run, because the ground was so soft before it dried out. And of course, that was Frankel's glorious last hurrah.
Yeah, so we'll start with the only Group 2 on the card.
It is a Group 2.
The Long Distance Cup, but it's a Group 1 really masquerading as a Group 2, you'd think. And one name stands out here in the form of Stradivarius. He's had the perfect season.
Yep.
But the one thing I would ask about him is he's had a long season, 4 starts over longer distances, and for all that he won the £1 million bonus last time, he looked workmanlike.
Yeah, he made heavy weather of that, and it did feel like the wears and tears of that long season were beginning to catch up with him at York. Obviously 2 months off to refresh and reprogram him since then, which will help. He ran really well in this race last year as a 3-year-old when that was his 5th run, 6th run in fact of the season. This will be his 5th run. But the strains and stresses of the series is the reason why they put that £1 million up, because you don't put £1 million up if you really believe it's going to be won, especially not in the first season. And the staying series is so taxing and demanding because it's a long distance running within a long distance season. And I think that Stradivarius, one really interesting stat regards him is that I did some research this morning. You have to go back 50 years. 1968 was the last time an Ascot Gold Cup winner completed an unbeaten season, which is pretty remarkable. But it tells you the story of the demands that staying and marathon running effectively put on these horses. We've had horses like Rite of Passage, Papinur, who else? Cave Tara, who in theory had undefeated seasons, but they ran only twice and never ran after the Gold Cup. And Rite of Passage, it was his only start of the season. So you have to go back 50 years to find the last horse who, before and after Royal Ascot, was a Gold Cup winner who completed an unbeaten season. That tells you plenty about what's at stake for Stradivarius, and also just about that weight of history being against him. He's got the best form, we know that. He's got the perfect season, we've talked about that. But in terms of the weight of history, it is an arduous task for him to go right through all the way until October and peak again for a 5th time this season.
Yeah, he's a short price as well. I mean, even money's the best sort of price. He's edging into odds on, and favourites don't have a brilliant record in this. If I remember correctly, Order of St George has caused many a heart palpitation in the last couple of years.
And he sort of just pulled out the fire at the end of the race last year. And he's been beaten in this race. Horses like Estimate, horses like Leading Light came here expecting to win and didn't get the job done. And again, that ties into the fact of the long season taking its toll by mid-October. So it's going to be, he's treading a careful line, John Gosden, regards letting this horse have a bit of a rest after earning that £1 million, but also building him back up again. The bottom line is that he's the best horse in the race. The big question is, will he be able, will fatigue have kicked in, or will he still be fresh enough to produce his best? And you get the impression, Nick, you mentioned Order of St. George last year, you just get the feeling that if Stradivarius is going to win this, he's probably going to win it ugly, much the same as Order of St. George managed to last year.
I think the right question is, in regards to the opposition, is anything good enough form-wise to really test him? I look at Flag of Honour, and he's a front runner, so I imagine he's going to try and pour it on from the front.
Yeah, so let's spell this out a little bit more in ratings terms. Stradivarius is £7 ahead of the next best in, which is Flag of Honour. So you're talking about 3 or 4 lengths. That's what he's got to play with in theory, which you think would have him safe past the post first. But by the same token, the question is, to what extent will that £7 that he's got in hand be reduced by him perhaps not being at his top line and others coming up, because Flag of Honour has raised his game every time he's come to the track. There's an element of him bullying his way to the top in Ireland because he's been able to dictate in those races against what you could call inferior home opposition, but he is the up-and-comer for Aidan O'Brien. No surprise that Ryan Moore has selected him, and as you said, it's a straightforward game for Flag of Honour in that he's going to be out in front and play catch me if you can to Stradivarius.
What do you think about this Sir Eric, 3-year-old, completely unexposed, and has just been absolutely chucked into this level?
Yeah, I know, and he's in at the deep end, but how many times have we seen a horse thrown in at the deep end who manages to swim rather than sink when they come from Ballydoyle? I remember that horse Lost Treasure, who ran in the Abbey a week after he won a conditions race at Dundalk, and I thought, what on earth is that horse doing in here? And then I reported on the race for Timeform, and I thought, what's that flashing home that should have won? And it was Lost Treasure. So they know when there's a Group 1 horse in there. Sometimes it's a case of running in Group 1s to get them where they need to be, but by and large, he's here for a reason, and surely it will count for something, Nick, that he's the only horse in here with the Timeform P, i.e. he's the only horse who we think is going to take a significant step forward. Again, comes only 7 days on from his latest win, but again, that's not unusual policy for Aidan O'Brien.
Yeah, he's double-figure price. The only one other than Stradivarius and Flag of Honour that isn't a double-figure price is Thomas Hobson, and I must admit, I'm a bit surprised he's not down under right now.
Yeah, because it normally does end up in Melbourne, but he's had his attempts down there, and obviously the concentration is to keep him Northern Hemisphere in the sense of his window of opportunity in that Melbourne Cup has probably passed, but at least he roared back to life in the Doncaster Cup when he got the better of stablemate
Max Dynamite.
Max Dynamite. Did Max Dynamite run the other day?
I know he's not going to Australia either.
Right.
So potentially, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you though.
But how many times do we see Willie Mullins just treat a good horse like a good horse, whether it's flat or hurdles? Low Sun in the Cesaro, which True Self won the fillies listed race at Bath the other day. Both of those obviously dual purpose horses. And Thomas Hobson, what's on the plus side is that we know he's a group class stayer and he comes off the back of that Doncaster Cup win. On the negative side, he's an 8-year-old now, and there are some younger, hungrier horses in here to go against him. So we've got an interesting long distance cup. My answer to your next question is, if you were having a bet, where would it be? I would still say Stradivarius, in the belief that his class will out, and even if there's a shortfall in class, he's got courage to almost compensate for that, because we've seen Stradivarius win in different ways. Win ugly at York, which we talked about. He won by knockout at York earlier in the season in the Yorkshire Cup, and when he needs to roll his sleeves up, this horse can and does do that. So Stradivarius is the best horse in the race. Let's not lose sight of that fact. And I think, and sort of hope, that he bucks a trend of an unbeaten Gold Cup winner through the season. 50 years since the last one, will Stradivarius become the next one?
Yeah, I imagine plenty will have it in a Johnny G treble or quadruple as well on Champions Day. First of quite a few short prices.
4 of them, isn't it? Where would you rank Stradivarius in the Gosden short price Yankee? As in, would he be first, second, third or fourth pick in terms of thinking that he's probably going to get the job done? We're obviously going to talk about it later. Roaring Lion, Lati Dar, Cracksman, Stradivarius.
Probably at the bottom, I think, because he's been so workmanlike, and but not that he isn't that class apart in the race. But just
He's the one you'd be worried most about reproducing his best. Yeah, that's a good point, fair point.
So, Group 1 time now. We move on to the champion sprint, and this is probably the most, other than the last race, the most wide open group race of the day. This and loads of previous form in it as well. The Tin Man is favourite, and as you mentioned in your article, am I right in thinking he's the only Group 1 winner this year in the field?
Yeah. So what's been unusual about the sprint scene this year is how the baton's been passed around. We haven't had a sprint star who's come along and dominated the division, because it's been passed around to various horses at various times. 8 Group 1s across Europe so far this season. 9 if you include the 6.5 furlong Maurice de Geest. Tin Man was second, was he? Third, I think, behind Polydream and James Garfield, if not fourth. But I think we can qualify that as a Group 1 sprint. So we've had 9 different winners for the 9 different Group 1 sprints, and the only one that's coming here is the Tin Man on the back of his win at Haydock, wasn't it? So that simple statistic sort of explains why he's favourite. I don't know about you, but I'm a little bit meh when the Tin Man's favourite for a race. It doesn't scare me. I don't think, oh, that's a horse to be with. I'm sort of thinking, well, if he's favourite, I'm happy to play something else in the race and take me medicine if he wins, because even though he's an admirable horse who's a Group 1 winner last time, who's won this very race in the past, he's not the sort of horse who strikes fear into other sprinters, because his strike rate isn't that great, despite the fact he's won a Group 1 in each of the last 3 seasons.
I think for the first time this autumn, this morning, I felt a little bit of a chill, like I needed a sweater.
Yeah.
And that is like the music to the ears of La Breeze punters, because he comes good in the autumn.
Comes really good in the autumn, and the soft ground obviously really plays to his strengths. So he won this race last year. It teed up beautifully for him because the rain came, the strong pace came, and we had several horses misfiring, including Harry Angel. So it was very much the perfect storm for La Breeze. My issue with him, sort of like the Tin Man, is just the price, in that La Breeze was 10-1 when he won this last year. He's 5-1 now, but his season hasn't gone to the same plan or schedule as last season, in that you could almost see, very much charted by his results on the ledger, a growing in status and significance all the way to the champion sprint. This year he started low, pretty low level, and we all thought, well, he's going to build up to the autumn naturally. But he's never really put one building block on top of another so far this season. And I just think that he's a sort of horse whose price is based purely on the fact that he won this last year, rather than looking at the bigger picture of his season as a whole. So again, even though he won this race last year and he could easily bounce back given conditions are in his favour, I look at his price and I think I'm happy to take you on as well, because we've only seen flickers rather than the full switch of his true power this season.
Now, I've just been trying to think in my head then of someone to liken Harry Angel to, and I think I've got one.
Good. I like this.
Jose Mourinho.
Oh, right.
Because we know how good he is.
That is good.
And
to be honest, changed my article yet?
Yeah, crack on. He's been more bad than good so far this year, and we know that he really doesn't fancy it at Ascot generally.
And Mourinho or Harry Angel?
Well, both. Yeah, Mourinho and London might be a...
There is this third season syndrome with Mourinho, isn't there? And this is Harry Angel's third season. And since that flash of speed and power at York, I mean, that was all the way back in May. You have to go to find the last time we saw the real Harry Angel, since when things have taken a turn for the worse. Obviously had that incident at Royal Ascot, the Diamond Jubilee, which wasn't his fault. But at Haydock last time, he almost tipped over. He always walks that tightrope between racing enthusiastically and racing too freely. And it was a case of spilling over into being too free at Haydock. And you just wonder whether this horse is past the point of no return. I sort of think he is now. I think that he has to run here. This is the natural final hurrah for Harry Angel. It will have been the plan ever since he ran the race last year to try and redeem himself. But the way that he's got here, it leaves you worried about him. Whether his temperament or his reputation, one or both, is hanging by a thread. And again, much like the Tin Man and La Breeze, I just couldn't back Harry Angel at that price to remember how good he once was and to flip back into that race mode that he used to get into.
Yeah, he's turning into a bit of a rogue and he's on the way down, but one rogue on the way back up is Lamato.
Yeah.
But for all that he won the challenge last time, Does that not prove that he's a bona fide 7 furlong horse?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why he's gone to 7 furlongs is partly because it suits him well. We sort of thought that from the Park Stakes a couple of years ago, but because there's no Group 1 at 7 furlongs in Britain, he's had to either go to a mile or 6 furlongs to try to stamp his card with a Group 1 certificate. But he's back at 7 furlongs because they've almost given up a little bit on that Group 1 dream and reassessed him and reprogrammed him, and he has come good again over 7 furlongs. So now he's back into the lion's den of a Group 1 over 6 furlongs and on soft ground as well, because the one thing about Limato that connections have always stressed is that he needs top of the ground. He's here because he's in form, because it's a winnable Group 1, and because why not? You know, there's nothing to lose with running him here. But he's about, what, 16
to 1.
16 to 1. If it was fast ground, he'd be 10 to 1. But I think the reason he's 16 to 1 tells you about A, the different environment that he faces here with the trip, the different environment that he faces here with the company, and also that record on soft ground. So just plenty of doubts about Limato.
Yeah, and looking at the rest of the market, we're edging into bridesmaid territory really, whereas they've all got differing profiles. I mentioned them: Brando, Tasleet, Sands of Marley, but you would expect if this was a proper Group 1, they'd be falling just a bit short.
Yeah, Tasleet is an interesting one because he's been lightly raced this season. He's fresh for this. He's run well in this race in the past, and he's at least knocked on the door of a Group 1. Several placings to his name. Stall 1 puts me off a little bit with him because he finds himself out on the flank on that far side, which is going to bring complications. And obviously I've talked quite negatively about most of the horses that we've discussed so far, just thinking from purely a purist's and a punter's point of view of what I'd like to back. And because we're sort of being negative about the front end of the market, I've had to look a little bit deeper. And there is a horse I'd like to talk about briefly, just in the sense of you couldn't select him in terms of ratings, but just in terms of profile, in terms of joining dots, Projection to me is an interesting runner at a big price. And that's because his record at Ascot, for one thing, is really impressive. He finally won a group race, the Bengough Stakes, last time. And you think, well, he had 3 rivals to beat, including Dream of Dreams, who's a sort of similar price to him, and another one who struggles at the top table. But when a horse has been on the sort of losing run that Projection has, you might find that the act of winning just unlocks something in him. The second point is his record on ground softer than good. Really impressive. Again, faced it 3 times. The first time he was badly drawn in the Stewards Cup, but the other times he was second in the Bengough, which he should have won 2 years ago, and then this latest Bengough. And it just struck me watching him, even though it was calm waters with just 3 rivals, he really bombed through that race. And he's a horse who always does more on the bridle than off it. But Ascot is a track which plays to those strengths, and soft ground also plays to those strengths as well, because there'll be horses who are just thrown in the towel around him when he's still able to go through the motions and go through the gears. So even though it's hard to make that extra leap of thinking that Projection can win, I really think Projection can finish 3rd and maybe even 2nd, and then that outside chance that he can win, because at least he's coming in red hot form, at least he's coming in off the back of a win, and at least he's got that track form and ground form which speak in his favour. So even though on ratings he's a long way off the required standard, there's reasons for thinking that that required standard won't be hit by many in here, and there's reasons for thinking that he might just push on a bit because he's coming, this race is landing for him at just the right time.
Yeah, 20 to 1 with question marks about the others.
Yeah.
It's one of those, isn't it?
It's the one race on the card where I think this is a betting race in the sense of I want to be against the top of the market and I want to look a little deeper.
So we mentioned the Johnny G forecast earlier on. Leg 2 starts now in the Fillies and Mares, and it's a race which seemingly revolves around her. And Larty Dar, she was 2nd in the St Ledger on just a 4th start. How good was that in terms of ratings, and where does it put her in relation to the rest of the field?
Yeah. So that's the main point with her, is that the 2nd in the St Ledger represents the best form of any filly in here, at least at the weight. She's getting the weight for age as a 3-year-old. And then I think, well, she's not just got the best form, but she's got the most potential as well, because she's had just 4 races in her life. And I think that the fact that she had just 3 races prior to Doncaster really cost her a chance of winning that classic, because Kew Gardens in contrast to her, had a full-on campaign which included building up to the Derby, running in the Derby, running over in France, coming back for Royal Ascot and the Queen's Vase, just flitting about and having the classic full-on campaign ahead of the St. Leger. And it meant that at the crucial part of the race, he was able to kick on, whereas Lati Dar was almost wheel spinning at one stage early in the straight. And she did close on him at the end, but obviously the game was over. But that is a strong piece of form. It's obviously a classic piece of form. And I think it told us that A, she is a proper Group 1 filly, and B, there's still some edges to be put on her which makes you think that she's going to be a proper heavyweight, especially next season. So this is almost the start of one game and the end of another. It's the end of a 3-year-old season, hoping for a win, but also one eye is on her next year, because if indeed Enable tiptoes off the stage, if she goes to America and wins out there and they think, well, she's done more than enough, then this girl can perhaps fill that stable and fill her shoes.
She does face a Group 1 winning filly, though, in the form of Kite Surf.
Yeah. We were watching Kite Surf back again. She's a French filly trained by Andre Fabre, carries a familiar Godolphin blue colours, but she's done most of her work in France. And she won, on Trials Day, Arc Trials Day, they've got the Foy or the Foy. I think if you're proper racing, you have to say Foy.
Oh, right, well, that's not me then.
Pre-Foy, Pre-Niel, Pre-Vermeer. Pre-Vermeer is for fillies and mares. She was favourite, she won, she beat Magic Wand, but it's worth going to have a look on that at YouTube, type in Pre-Vermeer 2018, and you'll see that it's really hard work for her, that she's flat out in last place into the straight, and it's only in the final few strides that she really kicks in and she gets on top late on. So my worry with her is that strategy, that playbook is difficult, especially for Ascot, because if she does at Ascot what she did at Longchamp, then they're just going to get too far away from her before that stamina kicks in. So the worry with her is that even though Ascot is a big track in historical terms and a big track in geographical terms, it's quite a short straight at Ascot, and once you turn into that sharp turn into the straight, they're already kicking on, and she might be struggling at that point and they might get away from it. That's just my interpretation of watching Kite Surf, but she is a Group 1 winner. She's trained by Fabre, and she bypassed the Arc to freshen up for a big shot at this, and obviously the ground serves her really well, as does the pace as well, because Aidan O'Brien's, he's not got one or two in here.
He's just thrown the entire drawer of darts at this one, hasn't he?
Yeah, 2 sets of darts he's thrown at this. But 2 of those are natural front runners, Bye Baby in particular. And you get the impression that it's going to be a strongly run race, which in theory will suit Kite Surf. But then again, Nick, in theory that was going to suit Lati Dar as well, with that St. Leger stamina that she proved in finishing second at Doncaster. But Kite Surf, yeah, that's probably Lati Dar's biggest danger, but Kite Surf is her own worst enemy. Out of those O'Brien 6, I just sort of thought that Magical, yeah, she's the choice of Ryan Moore, which obviously is going to lock points off her price, as we've seen in the course of the day. But she ran in the Arc last time and she finished only midfield, but she finished in midfield from being in the last pair into the straight. There was her and Sea of Class right at the back of the field, and obviously Sea of Class had the gears to just whiz through. It was a bit more difficult for her because she's not in her league and she was switched towards the outside. But finishing where she did in the Arc it told me that, yeah, she's probably still getting better, still developing, because she hasn't raced much this season, and that she stays the trip well. That was her first go at 1.5 miles and she saw it out well. So it's easy to join those dots and say, yeah, Magical is probably the number 1 for Aidan O'Brien, not just for the fact that Ryan Moore was chosen, but because her profile is more convincing than last year's winner Hydrangea, who's never really fired this season, has she?
Not really, no. Yeah. I remember reading in the Timeform report actually for the Arc where it likens Sea of Class to Magical or Magical to Sea of Class in terms of the passageway, and then very abruptly says that's where the comparisons end.
Yeah, but it did strike me that we both got, I did that report, and we had 2 3-year-old fillies who were side by side at the back of the field, and it was almost to put Sea of Class into context as much as Magical, because Magical's probably a Group 2 horse at the least, and she did the best down the outside running on, but Sea of Class just took off and they were next to each other. So it was as much to paint a positive picture of Sea of Class as belittle Magical, and like I said, to finish midfield from her position with her background, I think that was a positive step, and she'll certainly be back next year because there's a sense of unfinished business about her.
I'll very quickly add in a mythical question into this. If
Yeah.
we just pretend that it's been 3 or 4 weeks since the Arc,
Yeah.
and see if Class came here, how would you price it up or have it on the ratings? Would Latidar still be favourite, or would the other filly
That's a
be?
good question.
Because they will both be looking to take the Enable mantra next year if she doesn't come into training.
4 to 6 is Bet Lynch in the mythical fillies and mares, where Sea of Class didn't run in the Arc. Although no, because that's factoring in how good she was in the Arc.
Yeah, if we get, well, let's say she's had 3 weeks to freshen
Yeah,
up.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, 4 to 6 for this,
Yeah.
and she'd win. So what price? Where would Latidar have finished in the Arc?
Similar. I'm probably third.
Oh, I've gone 4th.
Have you?
Oh, was 3rd? Cloth of Stars 3rd.
I think so.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's the correct answer, 3rd, yeah. But yeah, I think this is one of those where you can analyse the race in different ways. You can approach it and slice it up in different ways. But for me, the answer is always Latidar, in the sense of the arguments against her are more hypothetical and more speculative about her stage of maturity, about how the race is going to be run. But the bottom line of who's got the best form and who's got the most potential, it's Latidar for me. So you put Stradivarius in 4th in the ranking list of Gosden's short-priced foursome. Where are you putting Latidar?
It gets tricky, this.
Bearing in mind you've still got Roaring Lion and Cracksman to come.
Yeah, I'd probably put her top.
Top, yeah? I'm happy with that. I think I'll put her top as well. And that's a good way to look at it, in the sense of John Gosden's got 4 short-priced favourites at the meeting. I think the one with the least question marks over it, and the one with the most convincing profile, is Latidar. What price is she? About?
About 5 to 4.
Yeah, I mean, there's a case for saying she should be 10 to 11, 4 to 5, really, given how strong that certain edge of performance was, and the fact that she's still on an upward curve. Yeah.
Righto, into the QE2 now, and it's leg 3 of the Johnny G.
Yeah, it is.
Lucky 15, or would it just be a... Yeah, could be a lucky 15, couldn't
Lucky
it, I suppose?
15.
The biggest price in this as well, Roaring Lion, he's about 9 to 4, and he had entries in both this and the Champion Stakes. Because of the ground, he comes here.
Because of the ground.
Officially.
Sorry.
Would you say that's the right decision?
Is it the right decision? It's a good question, isn't it? It's the right, yeah, it is the right decision. It's the right decision. And I think the reason why it's the right decision is that you're probably going to have to run, in Timeform terms, to 125 to win the QE2. With Crystal Ocean and Cracksman swimming around the Champion Stake, you might have to run to 135 to win that. So that's quite a good way of looking at it, I think. And so the question becomes, not is it the right decision, but is he going to be as good at a mile, isn't it? That's the bottom line with this race. I mean, the grey areas with Latidar, with Stradivarius, with Cracksman, there's a lot of grey areas around those where you think, well, the outside influences, the external influences which are going to impact upon the horse. With Roaring Lion, he's pretty much bomb-proof by now, in terms of when he turns up to the track, he runs to high 120s and he can overcome certain barriers and certain different tactical questions he's been asked. But can he do it over a mile? And I think the answer to that is, yeah, I think he can run to the same rating at a mile and a quarter. And the reason for that is that if when you think about the way that he's won those mile and a quarter races as well, it's usually with a burst of speed, isn't it, rather than grinding it out. Think even back to the Dante, when it was sort of, if it was a boxing match, the umpire would have stopped it before he even hit the front, because he was just bombing along before he was let loose. And I looked at the finishing times of both his last 2 wins, at York in the International and at Leopardstown in the Irish Champion, and it's just over 34 seconds for the last 3 furlongs which he's covering, and you know, it takes a mile of speed to do that. And the way that Ballydoyle set up the Irish Champion Stakes was to make it a test of speed, because they'd come round to the fact that Saxon Warrior was a miler all along and had slightly got it wrong. Most of us had got it wrong for sure in thinking that the deep impact stamina would kick in, but he was just an explosive miler who did what he did in the Guineas and was unable to reproduce it subsequently because of the trip or the injury he sustained here. But it was interesting how the Irish Champion Stakes, it will be in the record books as a 1.25 mile race, of course, but the way that Ballydoyle framed that race was to make it a mile test, and Roaring Lion was unaware of that fact, and Oisin Murphy, so he held him up from a wide draw, and the strong pace didn't materialise, so he found himself in a hole into the straight because he was wide and 2/3 back. So the fact that, yes, obviously Saxon Warrior sustains an injury, but the fact that he could run so fast to catch that horse and run so fast against the clock means that we are talking about a horse with significant speed, and it's just about when he deploys that speed. So I sort of think of it like a bit like 2 Down Hoffer Gosden, in the sense of, do you remember when he won the Champagne Stakes? He unleashed that turn of foot in like the 3rd quarter of the race, where he went from 5th to 1st in very quick time. With the Dewhurst, it had to be deployed in a different way because of the exertions it took to settle him, the steady pace which affected him, and the position he was in when the sprint began. We still saw that devastating speed, but we just deployed at a different stage of the race. So speed kills above all in any race, and 1.25 miles or a mile, Roaring Lion, I think he's got the speed for a mile for sure. What I'm saying is that if Roaring Lion was to win this by 2 or 3 lengths, we could easily chart back why he was able to do that by looking at his various wins at various stages of the season and say, well, of course he had the speed for a mile because he was doing this over 1.25 miles at certain stages. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was just thinking, do you think there's a little bit of the long term in this? I know you concentrate on racing primarily, but would having a Group 1 over a mile add to his bloodstock value in the future?
Yeah, I forgot that, but he hasn't won a Group 1 at a mile, has he?
No, he
second in
ran
the Race
well
and Post Trophy.
Yeah, in the Guineas as well, he ran well in that.
5th in the Guineas, but not beaten far.
I think he was on the wrong side.
I mean, if you were writing an advert for a stallion, you'd say 5-time Group 1 winner, including at a mile. That's a big ticket for the bloodstock industry. So yeah, it's a really good point to make. And it sort of answers that question of why is he here, why is he not in the Champion Stakes and more natural fit for a horse who's spent the most of the season over 1.25 miles, and it's very clear that that's his best trip. So there's commercial reasons, there is ground reasons in the sense of he doesn't want to slog probably over 1.25 miles. But there's also that bottom line reason, which I said that you can probably run to 125 and win this, you might have to run to 135 in the Champion Stakes. And the reason why you might get away with running to 125 and winning a QE2 is that the much of a muchness, aren't there, the rest of them, by and large, and we will chat briefly about some of the others in there, but like the sprint division, it's just a ball that's been passed around a bit, isn't it? We had Alpha Centauri, who was obviously out on her own and could have won whatever mile race she was asked to when in a pomp, but she's out of the way now, and there's just a sense that it's much of a muchness regards the other milers in Europe.
Yeah, I think the most interesting one here, Alpha Centauri plays a big part in the form, but one horse that does want it to be a slog is a Daib, who...
Yeah, that's right.
The forgotten horse, really. I mean, he was the flavour of the month back in March, April, May, when hosing up in the Lincoln, following up, but ever since he's just not had his ground.
Yeah, and he was nearly favourite for the Lockhinge because of his work in the Lincoln and at Sandown in that Bet365 mile. I think it's called the Bet365 mile, sorry. 154 days he's had off, which to some people they might think, well, that's a long absence. But he virtually had a foot on the plane for Roaring Lion's Irish Champion Stakes before the ground was considered not softy enough for him to take part. But the reason I'm mentioning that is because he'll have been trained for fitness and for condition for that date in mid-September. So I don't think he's been let down completely, and this is like sort of his first start back. I think he'll have done a lot of work because it's not only to get him to that Group 1 in Ireland, which he had to miss or was thought best for him to miss, but he's had a long time to hone his fitness. So I don't think he'll lack for anything. If he lacks for anything, it will just be for ability against Roaring Lion. But yeah, what price is he, Nick, about?
About 8 to 1.
Yeah. So immediately after he was doing that work, earlier in the season, you'd have struggled to get 8-1 for him for this race back then, because it was clear that he likes soft ground, that he likes a straight mile, and that he was highly progressive. So not much has changed from his part, and yet he's still available at 8-1. So yeah, if there's a horse in there who's going to make it more than a 1-2-5 winning bar, then it's probably a Dayeb, because he's still an unexposed and unknown quantity, because we don't quite know yet what he can do given a mile on soft ground.
And there's two main advertisements for the Alpha Centauri form. We've got Recoletus, who found her too good in the Marois and then went on to win the Prix de Moulin. And then we've also got my favourite word as well, the lineal filly, Lawrence, who beat her, and as likeable as it gets, and she's followed it up with another Group 1 in the Sun Chariot.
When we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and I said, the thing about Lawrence, Nick, is that she can keep winning and I'll keep losing money, but I'm happy that to take her on. I'm less happy to take her on time and again now, because she's won every battle that we've gone up against, me and Lawrence. So she hasn't just beaten Alpha Centauri, she's absolutely beaten me down to a pulp and to admiration and respect. Again, we're back to that point of the fillies is one thing, but Roaring Lions and Alpha Males is quite another. So Lawrence has got a point to prove. And I sort of, I've got utmost respect for Lawrence, and neither myself nor ratings can ever do her justice. But she's got a CV that speaks for itself. Recoletos is certainly interesting, because he's probably the best miler in France. He ran in the Champion Stakes last year. Remember, he was in the jet wash of Cracksman, along with Highland Reel and Port's Word. But he was seen then very much as a 1.25 mile horse. It's only this year that he's been reinvented as a miler, but it means that he's got that stamina to call on if the ground is soft, which it is, and if the field generates a strong pace, which is likely given that we've got 15 runners, including a few front runners amongst them. So that 1.25 mile stamina will come in handy for Recoletos. It was an all-out win last time in a race which he was entitled to, given his form. He had that issue, didn't he, when he came to Ascot for the Queen Anne? Something happened to him on the day. Can you remember?
Yeah,
I can't remember exactly what it was.
I think he got overly worked up on the going to post and injured himself or something like that.
The trainer wasn't happy either, because I think that the horse might have been tested beforehand.
That was it. Right? Yeah, he hates needles, and it completely shook him up, and he just didn't run his race.
So obviously measures will be taken. Don't judge him on that. But I still think that Roaring Lion, he's got by far the best form, he's got by far the punchiest rating, and the question is, will he be able to show that form and rating at a mile? And my answer is yes, because of the different elements we've seen from him at different times. What about Lord Glitters? If you'll be betting without Roaring Lion, or the each way betting, who would you be warming to Adair then, given the...
Possibly. I mean, I like Lawrence. I can see her boxing on into a place. Adayab's probably the one who's open to improvement. Lord Glitters was earlier in the season, and then he's sort of never gone on at this level. Yeah. So, and he's been all the way to Canada as well.
That's right. Yeah. But he likes Ascot, doesn't he? Especially the straight track.
Yeah, it's a weak race, to be honest.
Where are you putting Roaring Lion? Either spot 2 or spot 3 in your John Gosden hierarchical Yankee?
I keep thinking about this because I don't want to be rude to Cracksman, but I would put him second, I think.
So yeah, Roaring Lion is second. He'd be second in mine. I think I was mirrors. In terms of the Gosden Shaw price horses. But it brings us to Cracksman, doesn't it, in the Champion Stakes. It's a hard one to talk about this from Timeform perspective. And I say hard because he's obviously got this massive rating, which still makes him the best horse in Europe.
Yeah, checked. He's £2 higher than Enable at the moment, which winds.
I know, yeah, it winds
plenty of people up.
£2 higher than Winks, or the same as Winks?
Not sure about Winks.
Yeah, don't mention it. But obviously, what we found with a rating is an expression of what a horse can do under its optimum conditions at its best, and you can't manipulate a rating or pull it down or push it up on the basis or without real consideration and good reason. Now that rating, that monster rating, comes from this race last year, which he won by 6 or 7 lengths, was it? I mean, how often do you see Group 1s win by 6 or 7 lengths?
It's as far as he liked, wasn't it, really?
And then you look at who he beat. Recoletos, Group 1 winner subsequently in the second wave in the market for the QE2. Portsword, Group 1 winner this season, King George. And Highland Reel, obviously, one of the headline acts for the last decade or so. So the form, as a piece of form, you can't knock it at all. Won by a wide margin, be proper Group 1 horses, just look brilliant. Now, so we come to that fact of, well, we've got that 136, which is his Timeform rating then. He's still got it now, even though by common consent he hasn't been at the same power. But you look at the actual results, and he still won 2 Group 1s and finished second in another. And that in itself is not reason to drag that rating down, because the surface statistics speak really well for him. So, of course, we're in that conundrum of a 136 rating, which is anchored around his neck, and everyone is pulling down on us saying, what are you doing with that rating that high? But the specifics and the nuances of that rating are really robust. And this is his big day. And we come to the question of headgear, don't we? Because this is the big thing with him. Blinkers on for the first time now. John Gosden has come out and said, well, I do it all the time in America. And he cited Northern Dancer and Secretariat as 2 horses who always wear blinkers. And no one thought anything of it. But that was the 1960s and 1970s. And that's a different jurisdiction in America. And it is a big deal in Britain when a high-class horse resorts to headgear. And John Gosden, I think, saying that, trying to downplay the fact that he's using headgear, it doesn't really bear up with the statistics, because in the last 6 years, with a horse who's established as a group class, John Gosden has put headgear on only 1 of those in the last 6 years. That was Wings of Desire last year, who was, remember, fancied for the Derby. In the second season, he coughed and spluttered his way through early on, and John Gosden put a pair of cheap pieces on him. But that's the only occasion in the last 6 years where John Gosden has reached for a headgear for a horse who's established as a top-level performer. So that really doesn't chime with what he's saying if it's no big deal, because it is a big deal, because we just don't see it very often. Only 22 horses in the last 6 years, again rated 120 or more, have had headgear fitted. So it is unusual, it is a big deal. And the biggest issue is not that he's wearing blinkers, but the reason why he's wearing blinkers. And it's almost an admission that he's not that there has been a slight power cut compared to what he was last year. So as much as John Gosden is playing this down, it is a big deal for a big horse, and therefore it's a big day for him, because this will be his defining day, in the sense of history will either judge Cracksman as a really good horse who had a brilliant day in the Champion Stakes, or an exceptional horse who showed, who ran to mid-130s twice in his career and sort of took the roof off Ascot twice.
Now, pardon me for getting the wrong jargon wrong, because I'm sure I'm going to break every law in the world when I say this, but was his uncle one of the ones who wore headgear when he won this Noble Mission?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's a Frankel thing, you know.
Oh, the Frankel, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a hashtag on Twitter which is to do with the fact that Frankels are a bit flighty like himself. That's what it is. I can't show that. You can probably find it yourself. Type in hashtag Frankel and then a space and it'll probably come up. But that's something I hadn't thought of, but it reflects the fact that a lot of Frankel's sons or higher achieving sons have a foible or a flaw or two that can and might be ironed out by headgear, and Cracksman is in that league himself, because remember the early Frankels were really fizzy and really exuberant, and then it turned out that most of the best ones were stays, who stayed a mile and a half, mile and a quarter really well. And it's just trying to find that magic mix, and headgear might be the perfect concoction. But sort of back to the point of the reason why it's quite hard for me and us at Timeform to talk about Cracksman in the context of a price is that we've got a horse who's miles clear on ratings, who's got the biggest and best rating of any horse currently active in the world, and yet we're pulling a face a bit because he's 5 to 6, 10 to 11 in a race. And that does reflect our own concerns and our own conundrum about a horse who hasn't fired his best shots so far this season, and does look there to be shot at, because the Cracksman we've seen in 2018 isn't as good as the Crystal Ocean we've seen in 2018. Really significant point that. Cracksman's got this big rating that he keeps pointing to, and John Gosden keeps pointing to, and we at Timeform keep pointing to every Monday when we produce our top horses list, and Cracksman's at the top and people are rolling their eyes. But that reflects his best, which came last year. His best this season was when he chased home Poet's Word. That's, in Timeform terms, his highest rating of the season. Same goes for Crystal Ocean, but obviously Crystal Ocean was just run down late on by a neck or so, whereas Cracksman sort of threw the towel in a bit in the Prince of Wales against the same horse. So a really important point to keep in mind is that Crystal Ocean has a higher Timeform rating than Cracksman based purely on the 2018 season. And again, we're sort of with the Roaring Lion conundrum of Crystal Ocean done his best over 1.5 miles so far, obviously in the King George and the Hardwick before then. He's coming back to 1.25 miles, and will he have the pace to shine at 1.25 miles? Well, he's got the softish ground to help him, to make it a bit more of a test. But more than that, think back to the King George when Poet's Word caught him. But he had Poet's Word and everything else flat out early in the straight because of this surge that he put in that third quarter of the race. And obviously, again, it's about deployment. He can deploy that at the same stage this time around. He's going to be all the harder for Cracksman to take care of. So it's not a deep champion stakes, is it?
Not really, no. When you've got
Capri, what do you make of Capri? I don't know.
I thought he ran well in the arc.
Did run well. He finished about 5th or 6th, didn't he? He was well positioned, sort of similar position to Enable for most of the race. And obviously, when she kicked up the turbo, he couldn't live with that. But in the context of his season, in the sense of he'd only run twice, hadn't he? He had that injury which forced him to miss the summer. Yeah, it was definitely a step back in the right direction. But even the Capri, who beat Crystal Ocean in the St. Ledger, that's not a literal piece of form in the sense of Crystal Ocean is a different horse now than he was then, and obviously that was 1.75 miles, which just taxed the stamina of Crystal Ocean, where it played right in the strengths of Capri.
Yeah, I think when you've got fellow Frankel, Monarch's Glen 4th in the betting, it probably shows that the race is lacking.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I know he was very good in the Wolferton, but it's a heck of a step up, isn't it, really?
Really is a big step up. Does he wear headgear, Monarchs? Yeah, he wears a hood. Yeah. So the headgear, the Frankel headgear, I've got to cross that out in case anyone can read it. The fascinating part about this race will be on that home turn, because that's the point that Crystal Ocean will have to play his cards if he's going to win this. He's going to have to make it a stamina test to bring his 12 furlong form into it. And that's the point where if there are any chinks in Cracksman's armour, that he'll sort of wave the white flag and say, nah, not for me, blinkers or no blinkers. So it's a fascinating race. It's a hard race from a betting point of view. My good feeling is that I'd much rather back Crystal Ocean than Cracksman, because you're hoping that the blinkers have an effect, whereas you know that Crystal Ocean is going to run to a big figure under these circumstances. So I find it a hard race in terms of betting, but a really exciting race in terms of the tactical conundrum, because just imagine that out of Swindley Bottom on the run to the home turn, when Cracksman then, we'll know then, won't we, whether Cracksman is the Cracksman of 2017 or this diluted version of 2018.
Would you like to add anything on the Czech-trained 100 to 1 shot subway dancer?
I was going to add something, but I've lost my notes, I think. Is he Czech-trained, yeah?
Czech-trained, French-campaigned. So he does have a Timeform rating, because I've no idea what it's like in the Czech Republic.
No, I've been to the Velká Pardubice. That was my own experience of Czechoslovakia.
Is that the big jumping race?
Yeah, like the Grand National. We there's a few of us went from Timeform, and we just got very drunk rather than poured over the paddock or the race. And then, of course, there's a photo somewhere of clambering over one of the fences, which you always have to do. Balmoral handicap, though, I said that I sort of weaseled out of saying anything firm from a betting point of view in the Champion Stakes, but at least we've got a few pointed conclusions to make regards the prices in the market for the Balmoral.
I suppose if you've managed to get this far in the jackpot, there's nothing quite like a 23 runner handicap to finish you off.
I never quite understand that when people say, "Oh, the punters love these races," and it's an ideal accompaniment to all the group races. It's not at all. It's complete bookmaker fodder.
Absolutely rancid.
It's no one loves these races. Even the people who say they love these races, they don't love them really.
5-1 the field. This Raising Sand is quite a short price because he won the Challenge Cup last time.
Yeah, won the Challenge Cup, goes really well at Ascot, goes really well on soft ground, and he's slightly ahead of the game because he picks up just a £6 penalty. I haven't looked exactly, but he will go for more than that for winning that race by that margin. So everything is in his favour. But it's a 22. We've got 3 reserves, so I think it's 20 runner capacity. It brings me to an interesting point in that I'm sort of hoping that Port Society gets in, that another horse comes out and Port Society gets in, because it leads me to the main one of my 2 arrows in this race, in that Mitcham Swagger's drawn in 2, Port Society is a reserve drawn 1, so he could do with Port Society turn up to give him some sort of lead into the race, because Port Society for Mark Johnston is a front runner. Mitcham Swagger might be left a little bit marooned on the outside of the field if Port Society isn't there, or if the field deviated one way or another. But in terms of form, Nick, we talked about the QE2 with the Dabe and Lord Glitters finishing first and second in the Lincoln, which sort of was the start of the springboard for both of them. In third that day was this fella, Mitcham Swagger, who'd always promised a big performance, and first start for Rafe Becker sort of showed there what he can really do. Now, he was absent for a good few months prior to coming back at Haydock a couple of weeks ago. He was 9-4 favourite, but it was fast ground, and I think it was probably just a tune-up for him. And a mile on soft ground suits him really well, and just looking at the strength of that form from the Lincoln, it's hard to play this race without at least having a save on Mitcham Swagger, because if Lord Glitters or a Dabe shows up well in the QE2, then surely this fella's going to shorten in price.
Yeah, I thought Argentello was interesting. He only won the other night at Kempton.
4 days ago at Kempton. And he must have come out bouncing, because it's not the usual John Gosden profile to go in again so soon, but it's a really valuable race. He's a horse who's on the up, first season racing as a 3-year-old, and he was clinical the other night, and he picks up just a £6 penalty, but that was Polytrack. Is it Polytrack at Kempton?
Yeah.
He has got experience of turf, obviously, but not turf as soft as this. So interesting with Argentello, whether he's streetwise enough for a race like this.
Anything else to close on? Or?
Yes.
Yep.
South Seas.
Yes.
This is just the second of my 2 arrows at the Balmoral, because we talk a lot about headgear with Cracksman. Well, South Seas has got cheek pieces on for the first time, and it's just the sort of horse who it might do something for him. His second last time came in one of those optional claimers, so you think, well, it's not much, but at least it was a step back. And the soft ground is key, because this horse forged his reputation on soft ground in his younger days, and this is his first time since he was a 3-year-old that he's going to get genuinely testing ground, which might unlock something in him. So South Seas is bubbling under, but he's got headgear and the ground. One or both of those might make a big difference to him. So my 2 arrows are Mitcham Swagger and South Seas for the Balmoral.
Well, cheers for that, and next time we see you, we'll see you in Tweed, because it'll be the National Hunt. Yeah.
We'll get Dan and better people than me on for that, though.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see. Thanks everyone, good luck and enjoy Saturday.